all the time, and we're talking about the bracha of light and darkness, etc., etc. But what's the relationship between Pokech Ibrim and the light and the darkness? Obviously, the light and the darkness, it's a global thing as opposed to an individual thing. But you would think that the Gemara would at least touch upon the bracha of Pokech Ibrim if as long as we're on the topic. You know what I mean?
That's a good question. I mean, the first thing I can think of is we're talking about specifically called Tiferes al Shema, a bracha connected to Shema, which is bracha of Yetzer Ha'Oros. The fact that we have the bracha of Pekech Ivrim, which in most shuls the Chazan says it in the morning, and people are yotze from that, it's more of a secondary thing. But when it comes specifically to Shema, that's already a mitzvah d'oraisa. Right? It's not a derabanan, which was instituted by the Anshe Knesset Agdola. So you can say in the derabanan, there's more room to be more lenient, and maybe a blind person could say Pekech Ivrim. However, when it comes to the d'oraisa of Tiferes al Shema, you have to be more strict, because it's saying that the bracha of Shema and people are being yotze, it's Yetzer Ha'Oros. So that's my first thought, which came up. I could look into it. I mean, this Mishnah specifically mentions, it's called Tiferes al Shema, right? Talking about a d'oraisa, biblical obligations. Right. We are holding here in the Gemara, Daf Chaf Daled Amud Beis 24b. In the Gemara, it's about exactly halfway between the two Mishnahs, about 12 lines down in the wide lines of the page. The last thing we discussed was people who have a accent or have a dialect which come from a certain place, and they say the words in very interesting, very funny type of ways. Whether it's, as it says in Nach, Shiboilis and Siboilis, where many people from Ephraim were killed, whether you're from Pittsburgh, whether you're whichever place you came from, if you're Ashkenazi, Moroccan, Taimani, every single place has their own dialect, how they pronounce the words. And therefore, when it comes to certain words in davening, the meaning could be very different. For example, by us, Ashkenazim, Aleph and Ayin sound the same. By others, Aleph and Ayin have different sounds. And if someone mispronounces it because they come from a different place, so they say the word Ya'er Hashem Panav Elecha, may Hashem shine his face to you. And instead they say Ya'er, which can mean either may Hashem get angry at you, may Hashem leave you, may Hashem, or it could just mean his Eretz, may Hashem be awakened to you, but it doesn't mean shining. Another example that was brought, we brought the Chaim Sofer, who explained this conversation between Rabbi Chia and Shimon bar Rabbi. One was telling the other one that you're disqualified to if you were a Levi, you would be disqualified to serve in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash, in the choir, because your voice is too deep. You know, many people in Pittsburgh were very excited. We had a big chazan here for Shabbos. And other people say, as he told them back, no, since you come from Bavel, you mispronounce the word V'chikisi Lashem, and you pronounce the word V'hikisi Lashem, sort of like many, you can say Tamanim or Moroccans do. They say a het instead of a ches. And it sounds like the word V'hikisi, or hey, instead of a ches, I am hitting, which is towards Hashem, which is a very blasphemous way of talking. And the exchange was, on a more deeper level, they were trying to get the halacha. And they were trying to say a Sanhedrin, someone who's a member of the Synod, the Sanhedrin, they have to be complete. They cannot have a mum, any bodily blemish. Like we said, the story of Moshe Feinstein, researching if a pacemaker is considered to be a mum, will stop him from joining a Sanhedrin. And a Sanhedrin preferably, obviously, they cannot have a mum. They cannot have any bodily blemish, especially if they spend much time in the Beis Hamikdash. And so he says, you cannot be on the Sanhedrin because you have a blemish that your voice is too deep, and it will be disqualifying for a Levi. And so he answered back, you also have a blemish that you mispronounce the words. But I don't hold that your blemish, that you mispronounce the words because of your dialect, is considered to be a disqualification. And the same thing, my disqualification, my voice is too deep, will not stop me, does not disqualify me from being a member of the Sanhedrin. And Chaim Sofer says it could even be discussing, could you be a permanent member of Sanhedrin or a guest member, a temporary member of Sanhedrin? But if someone is great enough that they are worthy to be in the Sanhedrin, there's no one as great as them, so a small blemish, like a deep voice, is not really an issue, is not really a problem. It's a good thing we didn't have recordings back then, because nowadays it's very easy to find a reason to disqualify people. All right. So now we discussed a person who has a deep voice. We discussed people which have different dialects. The Mishnah discussed people who have deformed hands. If they could do Birchas Kohanim, which in the Beis Hamikdash, they are disqualified. Nowadays in the shul, it's okay for them to do Birchas Kohanim. Yossi, Zman Rav Lo Riti Otcha. How are you, Yossi?
Baruch Hashem, how are you, Rabbi?
Hashem, it's today's a Rosh Chodesh Adar base, the first day of the second Adar. So it's a very happy time. We're talking about Beis Hamikdash, and you already bring it up.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Mike, Shalom Aleichem. So nowadays, especially in Chutz La'aretz, where we only have the blessing of Kohanim a few times a year, if a Kohen has any deformity on his hands, it's not a problem. Their hands are covered with a talis, or supposed to be, and you shouldn't be looking. Someone who is a painter, hands are dirty, could they be a chazan? Could they be, if they're a Kohen, could they do the Birchat Kohanim? I'm not doing the exact thing, but just similar. Omar Rav Huna. So Gemara will bring some more halachas, some more rules when it comes to which Kohen can do Birchas Kohanim and which Kohen cannot. Zavlagan, a Kohen who has teary eyes. Eyes are very watery. And I brought up a image of that. It should be. Nope. Let's go through our images. You can see it here on the big screen. So the very first one here. Here's somebody, their eyes are very, you can see on the screen. See someone with watery eyes. Or their eyes are very red. They're puffy like this. They're called the Zav Lagan, which means Zav. Their eyes are constantly flowing. So, Lo Yisa Eskapav. He is not allowed, if he is a Kohen, he cannot do Birchas Kohanim, lift up his hands, because people, Rashi says here, people look at the Kohen when he's blessing the people, and people are going to look, this is a person who you're getting to bless everyone. Ask the Gemara, there was a certain Kohen who lived in the neighborhood of Rav Huna, the one who said that the Kohen with watery eyes cannot do Duchanim Birchas Kohanim. And he would do Birchas Kohanim, he would be lifting his hands to bless everyone. So Rav Huna himself goes against his own ruling, answers the Gemara, Hahu dash be'irehava. That person in that particular neighborhood, everybody knew who he was. So everybody was used to it. Everybody it wasn't something uncommon or unique to see this person And therefore, nobody lifted their eyes twice when they saw the person with their eyes watering. Right? See this person with watering, he's a Kohen. With tears, so such a person won't raise any red flags. He's normal to see. And therefore, he could do Berchas Kohanim. It's not going to disturb anyone from paying attention to the blessing of the Kohanim. And it's not going to take away the honor of the Kohanim at all. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned in a Brisa a similar thing. Zavlagan Layisa is kappa of a Kohen whose eyes are watering, constantly flowing with tears, may not raise their hands to bless the people. But if it's a person who was in the city, everyone knows him, and he's common, then it is allowed.
One of the footnotes on that.
What does the footnote say?
It says that he's drooling on his beard
Again?
rather than his eyes.
Some say it means that he drools on his beard. Very interesting. So I can understand. People say it's not respectful for such a person to be to bless the people. If everybody sees it, it's fine. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Suma ba'achas me'einav lo yisa es kapav. If someone is blind in one eye, a Kohen, he cannot do Birchas Kohanim, cannot raise his hands. Because people look at him, and again, they take away their attention from him. Ask the Gemara, there was a certain Kohen who lived in the neighborhood of Rabbi Yochanan, the one who made this ruling, saying a blind person in one eye cannot Birchas Kohanim, and he was blind in one eye. Davaparis Yadeh, and he will do Birchas Kohanim. The Gemara answers, Hahu Dash Be'iroi Hava. This particular person was very well known in his city, and therefore he was allowed to do Birchas Kohanim. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned a similar brisa. Summa b'achas me'inav lo yisa es kapav. One who is blind in one eye may not do Birchas Kohanim. But if he's a familiar figure in his town, then it's allowed. It's not a problem. People will not. If people are familiar with someone, then it's fine.
Well, what would be what difference would be made? Unless his eyes not that developed and it looked different. But if he just couldn't see out of one eye, how would it make it?
So if someone can't see in one eye, their eye could be lazy, wandering around. So it doesn't look proper. There's a story of the Maggid of Mizrich that he one time saw like a clay pot or a clay jug, and he looked at it and he said, the craftsman who made it is blind in one eye. And they went and they find out who made it, and it was true. The craftsman was blind in one eye. They asked the Maggid of Mizrich, how did you know? You ever met the craftsman? He said, no. He says, I asked him, how do you know? He says he could see in the jug, he could see the Dvar Havaya, the word of Hashem, which is keeping it alive, which is giving it chayis, which is constantly creating it, Hashem's word. And he could see the way it was made was by someone who's blind in one eye. And therefore he could see. So when someone's blind in one eye, spiritually, it means that there's something different about it. Maybe nothing to do with them, not their issue, not their reason, not their fault, but there's something spiritually different. And there's also a reason why you would think that they should not do Birchas Kohanim. Which is interesting. This is specifically nowadays in Shul. In the Beis HaMikdash, even if the whole entire nation who they were, if they had any deformities, which, right, if they had missing a hand, a foot, their eyes are watery, tearing up, too red, in the Beis HaMikdash, it wouldn't help, because a balmun, someone who has a blemish, would be disqualified for the Beis HaMikdash. But not in the Beis HaMikdash, a Kohen definitely could bless. As it says, Daber Aaron v'Abanav, speak to Aaron and his sons, tell them to bless the people. Hashem didn't make a condition, you got to be a complete Kohen. To be in the Beis HaMikdash, you can't have any disqualifications. So, for example, let's say a Kohen is in a wheelchair. Could he do Birchas Kohanim? Yeah, serving in the Beis HaMikdash, you couldn't sit, you had to stand. No one's allowed to sit. So in the Beis HaMikdash, you would be disqualified. But in the shul, Kohen in a wheelchair is allowed to make a bracha as long as he cannot stand. He is allowed to do Birchas Kohanim. A disqualification, which is a person's fault, that disqualifies them even today. For example, a Kohen which drinks wine, or someone who's drunk, a Kohen, he cannot do Birchas Kohanim. He cannot do the blessing of the Kohanim, even today. Because that's a disqualification which they could fix. He could just not drink, and then they could do Birchas Kohanim. But something which is not in your hand, nothing you could do about it. Tosfos over here on the page writes an interesting thing, that even today, if a Kohen is having a blemish on their foot, it also disqualifies them if they're not wearing shoes. But if they're wearing shoes or socks and you can't see it, then it does not disqualify them. And the reason he explains is because people don't look at your feet usually. So if someone has a disqualification or something strange about their feet, it's not really something you could see so commonly.
I mean, when Kohanim are duchening, usually they're wearing socks, or they're or are they wearing usually no shoes at all, or that's actually are they barefoot when they're doing duchening? Or are the Kohanim barefoot when they're doing?
Because they take off. So Kohanim take off their shoes, take off leather shoes. Yes, because in the Beis HaMikdash they were barefoot, so they take off their shoes. We're going to learn in the next Mishnah actually about this particular thing. Kohanim not wearing shoes on their feet.
And do they wear socks, or is it different?
So nowadays we wear socks. Places in hot weather like Morocco or things were different. We could get into that another time. Emir Hashem. If you have the Bir Halacha, which is the Mishnah Berurah, he writes that if there's a Kohen who's blind in one eye, but you can't even tell they're blind, it's not a problem at all. Chaim, Sfardi Posek, he writes, even if they're blind in two eyes, it's not an issue. The Chaim. Because the Ritva, one of the Rishonim writes that if someone is blind in two eyes, even everyone in the city knows them, they should not do Birchas Kohanim. Halacha, we are more lenient today, specifically in Chutz La'aretz, specifically outside of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mi shahayu yadav tzivuos, one whose hands are colored. Colored, we brought the examples, right? Their hands are dirty, hands like this. A Kohen whose hands are dirty, he should not do Birchas Kohanim. Right? He's a painter, someone whose hands are like this. It's called painter hands. Lo yisas kapav, they should not do Birchas Kohanim because it's not respectful for everyone. Tana was taught in a brisa. If most of the people in the city are engaged in such an occupation of dyeing, which back then there were no gloves, right? The people's hands, they would dye and you get dirty. So then, not an issue, mutter, it is completely permitted because everyone is used to it and no one's going to be looking at them as something unique. Rabbeinu Avraham Minahar. You heard of him?
Who? Rabbi Minahar? I don't think I've heard of him before. Was he from Beit Shammai?
No, more contemporary person. He says that if there is a uncommon type of blemish, things which are not common, because all the examples that were brought over here in the Gemara, said things that are common are fine. How about a blemish which is very uncommon? So, for example, if everyone in the city uses white paint, and there's one person in the city who has purple paint, so he sticks out from the rest of the city. So he says, and from the Gemara over here, it sounds like it's not permitted.
Was he one of actually the ones from prevent?
Yeah.
It's how to make prevent.
Yeah.
I,
In halacha today, you should not, someone who stutters, someone who has a different dialect, you should not appoint them to be a chazan, but if they are chazan, it's fine. If everybody speaks like that, it's fine. A Kohen who has a stutter or a Kohen who cannot pronounce the words properly, they should not be do birchas kohanim if they're the only Kohen. But if everybody's used to it, then it's fine. Nowadays, most people are mispronouncing the sounds in one way or the other. Whether we don't have the same Maser as the times of the Beis HaMikdash. In Russia, people, every place they mispronounce words differently. They would always say shin and sin, they would always mix them up together. So since, and especially nowadays, we have what's called a cholent. You know, everyone's from all over the world in different places. And you have Jews coming from every city. You have Ashkenazim, Sfardim, Teimanim, Chabadnikim, Russians. Everybody has a different dialect. You don't have to worry about particular dialects, how people are saying. There's a very special story of the Rebbe, how sensitive you have to be to somebody who looks different than everyone else, who has a body deformity. There was a certain person who lived in Crown Heights. He became more like a he became, I think he was always firm, maybe became more firm later on. And he was once in a terror, he was a victim of a terror attack. He passed away about 15 years ago. And since he was in a terror attack and he almost died, and doctors almost gave up on his life, and just managed to survive with extreme miracles. Married, he had children, a family. I'll bring up a picture of him soon. This person had a very deformed face. His face looked very unusual.
and it was because of the terror attack?
Because of a terror attack. I could bring up a picture of him soon. Now, on Erev Shabbos, on Friday afternoon, is a special time called Drumita Deza. Drumita Deza is a Kabbalistic thing, which is called the time of sleep in heaven. All the Rebbes, starting from the Maggid Mezrich, the Alter Baal Shem Tov, would be a Kabbalistic thing. They would sleep very, very little. But they would all take a nap on Erev Shabbos for a short time. It could be about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe half hour longer. But it would be a short nap. And there's a story when the Maggid Mezrich once was taking his nap on Erev Shabbos, he sent a message to Shlomo of Karlin, one of his great Talmidim, and he told him that your words that you're saying right now are actually your shirim that you're saying is causing such a ruckus in heaven that it's not letting me sleep. Please stop saying shirim. So we see from there that as great as Shlomo Karlin's shirim was, the sleep of the Maggid was even greater. Now, the Rebbe himself on Erev Shabbos would always put his hand on his arm and like this, and his eyes would close for a few minutes. Right by Mincha on Erev Shabbos, usually during Chazar Hashatz. You would never see it ever. I mean, the Rebbe will go for minimal sleep. We're talking about half hour a night, or not at all. Right? The Rebbe would have Yechidus till the morning, leave 7:70 at 7 in the morning, come back at 9 o'clock fresh for a new day's work. It wasn't a natural thing. So the Rebbe on Erev Shabbos going like this is something unique. The Rebbe never yawned in public, except for one night a year. which is the first night of Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe would yawn in public.
It was what?
Yawn. What is it? Why is that? Because it's idea that also on the first night of Rosh Hashanah, before the blowing of the shofar, the world does not have its chayas that it used to have.
So you see on it, and when again? You said? You see on when again?
Only the night of Rosh Hashanah. There was a particular, and the Rebbe would always put his hand down on Erev Rosh Hashanah, on Erev Shabbos, and it was idea of Devekos. You could see it. The Rebbe would sit down facing the crowd. I'm gonna bring up a picture. Hold on a second. Just bring up a picture in a second. Okay, let me go back to here. Here. Here's a picture of it.
They would have his hand up.
This is from Erev Shabbos Mincha. Now, Erev Mincha and Shabbos wasn't before Lichbench, it was 3:15 always, right? 3:15 in the afternoon. Right? The Rebbe, here's right? And there's many other pictures like this. The Rebbe is standing over the bima, putting his hand on his forehead. It's called the Ramita Deza, meaning it's ideal pi Kabbalah. So the other Rebbes would actually take a nap. The other previous Rebbeim, they would sleep for a short time. And our Rebbe would not sleep, but the Rebbe would put his hand on his forehead the only time that the Rebbe would do this during the week. So there was a certain person who, let's read the story here. There was at one point, right, the Rebbe stopped. Some Erev Shabbos, the Rebbe wouldn't do it. Now, for many, many years, the Rebbe did it, and for some weeks, the Rebbe stopped doing it. Why would the Rebbe stop? Now, since there was this person who had a big deformity, right? The person who unfortunately didn't look normal. He looked, after the terror attack, I'm saying his entire face was blown up. He was almost blind, that he could barely see. And people noticed a pattern. Whenever he would come to the Rebbe's mincha on Erev Shabbos, the Rebbe would not put his hand on his arm like that. Whenever he was there. And when he was not there, then the Rebbe continued doing what he did for many, many years.
What would he do if he was there? The
Rebbe, like this picture over here, this particular picture over here. This picture over here, which see the Rebbe leaning on his arm? Leaning on his arm?
He's shielding his face, right? Or his eyes.
Yeah, but it would only be an Erev Shabbos.
But if you said there was a person who would come.
So the person who will come, the Rebbe wouldn't do it. Why? People finally put one and one together. The Rebbe didn't want this person to feel that the Rebbe is turning his face away from him. He doesn't want to see him. So as great as it is, Kabbalistically, we cited the story of the Magdim is rich, right? To close your eyes in Erev Shabbos. As great as it was, the Rebbe did not want to make somebody feel uncomfortable. Somebody feel that he doesn't want to be seen.
I heard that story before.
All right, so I'm going to try finding the picture of the person. Usually I do this before this year, but I can't find it right now. But you see a picture of the person. Oh, I found it. Hold on a second. Let me see. I'll bring it right up. Hold on, let me bring it right up, and so just to get a better understanding of the story. His name is Shimon Pachima. Shalom Aleichem. Okay, let me just do it one more time. Here it is. Okay, so back to here. So this person praying with Shimon Pachima.
Oh, right
Right.
there. Yeah, could be good to
So
see.
here is this person, you see?
Yeah,
Shimon Pachima. So he passed away. How many years ago was this? 2018. Okay, so more recently. This is what he looked like. You see? So I'm saying I can understand if people feel a little bit unhappy, or he would feel he could feel offended that the Rebbe is not looking at him. Right?
yeah.
So on Erev Shabbos, the Rebbe would not put his head down whenever he would come to Mincha. So just a sensitivity. When someone's a deformity, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them, God forbid. On the contrary, it means that they have to be even more sensitive than usual.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't see their picture, actually, your imagination can go even more wild.
Now, bear in mind, he was blind,
Yeah.
right? He could barely see.
Mhm.
But still, he might hear from somebody else. Whenever you come, the Rebbe doesn't look.
Mhm.
Or the Rebbe wasn't looking at you. And imagine how he would feel.
Sure.
Right? There was a boy named Moshe Dickstein. He came from Eretz Yisrael. He came with his father from Israel. He came for Tishrei. And this young boy, when he saw this Shimon Pachima, he was all traumatized.
Mhm.
And he actually got very scared. So the father wrote to the Rebbe that a blessing for his son, that my son shouldn't be traumatized by this Shimon Pachima. And he wrote, I noticed that the Rebbe does not put his arm down on his head whenever Shimon Pachima is around. The Rebbe wrote back one word, Avas Yisrael. You have to love your fellow Jew. So it's a very special thing. Again, the Rebbe on Erev Shabbos, who knows what the Rebbe is accomplishing in Shemayim, in heaven, right? From one word, we know how many things the Rebbe could accomplish. My father has a story that it was an Erev, it was on the first night of Pesach, or second night of Pesach. He was by the Rebbe's Seder in some of the earlier years, in 1969, when you were able to go to the Rebbe's Seder.
That was your father.
My father, he remembers this. And there was someone near Yaakov Katz. He used to read the Haggadah out loud by the Seder, by the Rebbe Seder. And he came during Nirtza, he say the pasuk, Hashem does great miracles forever. His kindness is everlasting. And he said it, and the Rebbe told him, repeat it the second time. So he said it again. The Rebbe told him, repeat it a third time. This time he did it even louder. Later on that night, found out there were 3 big miracles that took place in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael that night. There were terror attacks that were foiled. And Baruch Hashem, nobody was hurt or injured. So from the Rebbe, every small thing is a very big deal. Big thing, right? The Rebbe is adding and changing and doing things all over the world constantly. And so for Avos Yisrael, for another Jew, the Rebbe, even a Jew, couldn't see, but just in order they shouldn't be upset or offended hearing from someone else. The Rebbe would not look at you during Mincha. The Rebbe would change from his minhag that is happening. So just the idea of how to approach. When you see someone with a deformity, it's a sign, that you have to have even more Avos Yisrael than usual. Right. Okay, we'll do just the next, actually we'll hold off on the Mishnah till tomorrow. On Friday, there was a discussion about Chaf of Adar Aleph, the 26th of Adar, 1st of Adar, when there was a very large Pittsburgh group which came to the Rebbe. So I wanted to show 1 or 2 pictures and videos from that day. 27 Chav Zayin Adar Aleph. This is a Rebbe on the way to the oil. Remember, we discussed the Rebbe suffered a stroke at the oil. Since then, we have not merited to hear any new sichas, have any new farbrengens from the Rebbe. That's the Rebbe on the way to the oil. The day before, the Rebbe gave out dollars, and many special things happened on that by that dollars. So we're just going to do, besides for Pittsburgh, a few hundred people from Pittsburgh going by the Rebbe. So we'll just go through several of them, but this particular video is very unique. So we're going to show this one.
The hair like that. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
His name is Sam Dom. He was a big balabais, a big baltaka.
Uh-huh. Where is he from?
I believe New York, but
Try this again.
Спасибо.
So this is where I want to get to the.
In London, that's going to Beit Chabad in Edgware.
3 years ago, you gave me a blessing for my son to be born, and he was born. Thank you very much.
I very much bless you, and thank you that you are telling me through this stage. Not everyone is doing so. It was nice.
Rabbi, I love you.
Take
Thank you very much.
Take this. This is the tzedakah for charity.
That's for your love.
Yeah, very cute. You have another famous story at the same dollars. This is Rabbi Dov Levanuni.
What the little boy said,
The girl said, Rebbe of Lubavitch, I love you. And the Rebbe laughed and smiled, and
She got an extra $1 for that.
I think so. The Rebbe said, this is for the love. But again, this is a very strong message.
Telling me through it was nice.
Rabbi, I love you.
Take the
Thank you very much.
Take this. This is the tzedakah for charity.
That's for your love.
It's for the love.
Yeah, an extra $1.
Yeah. Same idea of that's for the love.
The father also got it, I think, an extra $1.
Reb Dov Lavanuni, he bring the model of the Beis Hamikdash. We showed the video recently, how he was off by, he explained how he made a miscalculation because he was not measuring the ramp of the Beis Hamikdash, was off by like a fraction of a millimeter. The Rebbe told him this particular day.
Dov Lavnuni, het gemacht een model van de Beis Hamikdash met de Shittas Rambam.
Ze brengt natuurlijk de pictures en de model brengt ze was.
En dat is dan terug.
Ja, dat is nog wel fijn doen. Als een minuut. Doe de geifel. Dus in de toer. Dit is dan geen wazen, ze hebben de zeker, ze kunnen we het lenen.
Dat is de Shittas Rambam.
Broken was zorgen.
Nee.
Dat is nog geraam.
Ik ben ruim zullen we maar scheren. Eindigen de zeker of Rambam. En de deugen aan la toets op de mikde voor Spior. Met de cijfer. De Zorzaan gezin ter haai met nachas en reflexionen.
De kennis.
De kever?
De kennis van Israël.
De kever van Israël, ja. Dus door de keverse doedel, de keverse toeten. De tweede kever gaat er een U-turn.
Gaat gewassen.
Dus de proportie, de coin is dat groot. Het is 1 op 200.
Samen terug in de
ja.
Dat is maar goed neef, maar het wordt geraam. Dus verwacht maar terug, want we zeggen dan bij Samigdus.
Oh my.
Right, so he checked and corrected, which is off by three millimeters, half a meter in real life, right? So that
It sounds like it's a point of Shi'i.
right, he was a Holocaust survivor also.
The Rebbe just looked at him and said,
Right, so I'll show soon if I can find it, the video of when Pittsburgh went by the Rebbe. It's actually very, very unique.
Pittsburghers.
Pittsburgh was zeiche to go by, and the story I said, I repeated on Shabbos and Shul, was that there was a discussion by the Kinnis HaShluchim of that year in 1992. It takes place in Kislev, a few weeks before Hanukkah. where every shluch, all the shluchim from all different places decided that we're going to bring in people, groups from our city to go to New York, go to the Rebbe. And every place took a particular Shabbos when to go in. And Pittsburgh, they chose a Shabbos of Shabbos Parshas Vayakel. And they show Shabbos Parshas Vayakel, which ended up retroactively being the very last video, the very last time that the Rebbe had last time that the Rebbe had a Fabringen on Shabbos, because Sunday the Rebbe gave out dollars. Monday is when the Rebbe was at the oil and the Rebbe had a stroke. When it came up close to Parshas Vayakel, about a week and a half before, my father was trying to find out what happened, like what's the progress. And they realized that nobody realized who was supposed to be in charge or running the whole entire thing, and it wasn't yet arranged. And said, maybe we should push it off for another week and make it big. He spoke to his father-in-law, my grandfather, and he told him that when he was learning in yeshiva in France, and he didn't see his parents since he left Russia, that's already 5 years, and then he got a visa to go to America to see the Frierdiker Rebbe. And then, after he already booked the ticket to go, he received word that his parents are going to come to France after he hasn't seen them in 5 years, and they're coming in 2 weeks. So he wanted to know if perhaps he should push off going to the Rebbe for 2 weeks, first see his parents, and then go to the Rebbe. And he asked the mashpia on the yeshiva, his name is Rabbi Nissen Nemenov, who said that when you have a chance to go to the Rebbe, you don't push it off. And so that's what he did. He went to the Rebbe right away, and he didn't see his parents for another couple of years until he eventually made it to Canada, and he went to visit them. Another 2-3 years, he didn't see his parents. But he came to New York on Rosh Chodesh Shvat 1950, the first of Shvat. They went into Yechidus by the Frierdiker Rebbe on Chaf Beis. He went to the Yechidus Frierdiker Rebbe on Dalet Shvat, the 4th of Shvat, Sunday. And on Yud Shvat, the Frierdiker Rebbe was installed. The Frierdiker Rebbe passed away that Shabbos. So they went to Yechidus on Sunday. They saw the Frierdiker Rebbe for the first time and ended up being for the last time that Sunday. They were in Yechidus by the Frierdiker Rebbe, a very unique Yechidus. Well, you see from there, if you would have pushed off his ticket for 2 weeks, you wouldn't have seen the Frierdiker Rebbe. So therefore, when he's telling my father, he says, you don't push off going to the Rebbe. If it was planned to go, you don't push it off. So he went ahead and he went full on to arrange, the whole group from Pittsburgh. Ended up going 3 buses of people, plus many cars went in. And they were all by a Fabringen on Shabbos. They're supposed to go in the morning together as a group, but they ended up going much later, near the end of dollars in the last hour. And he was, I guess, from the last half hour of people to receive dollars from the Rebbe on that particular day. And the Rebbe gave him $1. The Rebbe sort of shook his head to say, Yasher Koyach. But those were, you could say, from the very last times that they went. Later on, they came back to Pittsburgh late at night, and the next day, Monday, they received an urgent call from New York that everyone should run to Shul and say Tehillim because the Rebbe had a stroke. So imagine if they would have pushed off one Shabbos, 1 week to go to the Rebbe, would have been after Chav Zayin Adar. For years later, people came over to my father, thanking him, thank you for bringing us to the Rebbe. We've received tremendous brachas, tremendous things from this trip with the Rebbe. So I'm going to bring up just the clip of dollars from the last dollars my father and several other Pittsburgh people went by the Rebbe. I'm going to just share it now on the screen, and with that we will conclude today. How the store is so
Mehr, a viele, wenn Hetos von jedem Morning und Tate Mame, oder Bischass der Reihe Bein auf Mamos, die Spoilers und die Samsus, wie das Welt dem angenommen Leben ehrlich, wie am sagt, dass Gott im Vergleich nicht eine dem really schmier. Bischass sich wegen
See that little kid over there?
Mhm.
That's my father going by the Rebbe, and that's me right over there.
Oh, that's you.
It's me.
What do they? Look at the picture.
Here's the last dollars.
You could go through all the tapes to find this.
I don't know.
To
They-
add a picture.
yeah.
Sorot
You know, you recognize this person? It's Yankel Pellet.
Ah, yes. Yes.
werden verliebt.
My friend that
All your family.
בבקשה, נו. הנה, נו.
No.
Yeah, so that was the very last dollars. Nicker is it shouldn't just be history, it should be living. We should have it again for bring-ins and dollars very, very soon. And